Okay, you should be able to hear me now. Let me know if you can hear me now. It seems that the sounds and the levels is okay. I actually had to do something to give me 1 second. All right, hopefully you can hear me now. Lala, welcome to the conversation. So, yeah, that was a little bit of snafu there, but the mic should be good now. And so, greetings and welcome back to those who've just joined us. This is Amuna, and you don't know already. I pray everybody is doing well. As I was saying on, not necessarily on mute, it was the sound that I had to change back over. We are on chapter 4. Okay, this book is a product of a challenge that I took up upon myself to do a chat GPT challenge to determine how and what was good and beneficial about this software. This software, like many other things, are tools. They're technologies that if you know what you're doing, you can get the benefits. And if not, you may struggle. And I will say that because this was a chat GPT challenge, I used chat GPT. So I did create a course to share what I did to produce this book. But if one is not able to access the course for whatever reason at this time, you can definitely use ChatGPT to find out how to write a book, right? I'm just showing you the mechanics of that, right? So again, the course is in the description. You're hearing me now. So we're going to go ahead and listen to a little of the book. I'm going to catch you up. The story is about a number of people, but a young girl named Ada and her mother Nkechi. They were street vendors, and then they got a good job in the rich part of town. Now they're living in a house. Financially, things are better, but emotionally and mentally, they're not adjusting well. And so currently, the wife, Mrs. Nkechi, she had to go off on an emergency, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. She didn't get off on an emergency yet. Let's go ahead and start listening, and then we're going to go from there. Let me know if it can be heard. We're on chapter 4.
Left the house early. Ada, feeling bored and left the house early. Ada, feeling bored and alone, insisted on helping Nkechi in the kitchen. Her mother eventually agreed and gave her the job of washing and slicing vegetables for a stew that would be served at dinner. The task was Chapter 4. Mr. Anik left the house early. Ada, feeling bored and alone, insisted on helping Nkechi in the kitchen. Her mother eventually agreed and gave her the job of washing and slicing vegetables for a stew that would be served at dinner. The task was simple, yet all she could think about was the conversation she overheard between Mrs. Anik and the woman. Later that evening around dinner time, Mr. Anik returned home. It was unlike him to come into the...
And sorry, the conversation was from the last episode in chapter 3, where they had a dinner party and this mysterious old woman in a white turban and white dress told her that she can't keeping secrets, right? So the little girl overheard it, and she kind of wants to figure out what is that the woman talking about.
Kitchen when dinner was being prepared, but today he casually entered the room. Ada and Nkechi stood at attention to greet him. Good evening, Mr. Anik. Good evening, he smiled. Nkechi caught a glimpse of him as she walked toward cabinets to grab the dinnerware. Today there was something mysterious about the boss, something that Ada, nor her mother, could put their finger on. Dinner is almost ready, she offered, hoping that would satisfy his curiosity. She used the ladle in her hand to carefully serve each dish. Her boss stood silently behind her, watching her work intently as Ada watched him. Dinner smells divine, he commented, finally breaking the silence. Nkechi smiled politely but didn't turn to face him. Thank you, sir. It is an honor to cook for your family. Ada kept her eyes on the drinking glasses she was cleaning, pretending not to notice the way Mr. Anik's gaze lingered on Hameda's behind.
So look, it didn't getting a little saucy, okay? So I'm trying to share it out on social media. But essentially, the boss, what's going on with the guy? You know what I mean? So let's stay tuned.
He continued.
Which unfortunately, I put this part in because oftentimes we think about office politics and we think about sexual harassment in the office, but it also takes place in household domestic settings. That was the case when we read books like just jumped out of my mind. You know, I'm going to come back and tell you. The book just jumped out of my mind. I know exactly the book. But anyway, when you're reading about slavery and enslavement in the house, quote unquote, Negro or the domestic, she oftentimes would have to undergo these type of subtle, very subtle passes and glances and advances that she really just wants to do her job. And he's also the male, because we see this story in Joseph in the Bible that they're being preyed upon by the employer. I'm gonna go get that book so I can remember the name, but go ahead and listen.
I've been thinking a lot about you lately, Nkechi. Me, she quizzed, shocked by his statement.
I was trying to remember.
Yes,
wait, pause. I was trying to remember this book we went over on this channel. Crazy book. Let me know if you've read Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. This book was crazy. Okay. And if you missed it, it's on the Lev Project. I'll put the link in so that you can go over the reading of this book. But it's much like the same thing. But in this case, it wasn't just, you know, you were employed in your home country. This was the slave master to the enslaved, right? So it was a little bit even more compounded. But let's continue.
Her boss walked closer to the stove, resting his hand lightly on the counter beside her. And I can't help but think, perhaps you could make an even bigger impact in other ways. I'm sure you're aware by now how much I admire you. I've noticed how hard you've worked, how dedicated you are. You're a woman of great strength and beauty. His fingers gently touched her arm, just below the elbow. Nkechi stiffened. Sir, please. I know you don't think of me that way right now. But one day, you will. Sir.
Sorry. Yeah, there is another thing that just came to my mind, which is the Book of Negroes, where the young girl, she was the housekeeper, she was older, and she was like her adoptive mother. And she realized as she continued to grow that she became prey for the master. And so she was kind of protective of her in that nature. So we don't really consider, you know, the ways in which people become objectified, right? And so he's giving her compliments. And I think Dr. Joy DeGruy speaks about this. He's giving her compliments, but she has to downplay it because she's seeing that those compliments are kind of making her open to whatever his next advancements are. But let's continue.
A voice called from the doorway, startling them both. It was one of the other staff members, a young man who worked as a gardener. He looked between Mr. Anik and the chef, his face flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. What is it? He sneered. The young man hesitated, then continued. There's a situation in the garden that requires your attention, sir. It's urgent. Mr. Anik released his chef's arm gently. Unable to continue, he fixed a polite smile back on his face and started to talk behind his gardener. I'll be there in a moment. No sooner than the gardener had left the room, Mr. Anik turned back in Nkechi's direction. We'll talk again soon.
So Mr. Anik is like, this is his time. His name is Aneke. I don't know why they keep calling him Anik, but he was like, this is his time, and he's pissed because, you know, he's married. She's literally in their home as their helper, as their chef, and he's over here, you know, doing the most.
Her body trembled, still reeling from the shock of her boss making a pass at her. Nkechi, the strong one, couldn't understand why she hadn't stood up for herself. For a moment, she had forgotten that her young daughter was there, watching the entire ordeal. Mama, what did he mean by that? Her mother didn't answer. She continued staring at the pot of soup, her expression distant. Then, with a sigh, she turned to face her worried child. I don't know, Ada, she said softly. I didn't expect this from him. He's always been kind, but now, it feels different. I don't know what to do. Ada wanted to scream, to tell her mother to leave the house, to quit her job before things got worse. But she could see conflict in her mother's eyes, the fear, the hesitation.
And again, this speaks to even what we're seeing today in the news cycle. And sadly, in the news cycle, it's both men and women that's enduring sexual harassment, but because whatever their goal is, whatever their desire is, hers is a steady job, right, where she doesn't have to struggle. Somebody else would be a leg up in the entertainment industry, wherever they're trying to go, whatever they're trying to do. Now they lose that voice that they had. They now become this disempowered individual based on what the choices, the desire, whatever they have and whatever they're going to lose, that they will begin to endorse. So that's kind of what we're exploring with her character, is that she's losing her grit. She's losing her sense of self because of the promise of stability. But let's continue.
I don't know what will happen if I speak out.
Are you going to
If
get
I
fired?
tell his wife, I could lose everything we've worked for. But if I stay silent, if I let him continue. Mama, you can't let him do this. You're better than this, you deserve more. Ada closed her eyes and wished that the old Nkechi would come back, the woman who had fought so hard for them both, the woman who had taught her how to survive. It was too late. Mama's new job had stolen her strength. I know, darling. But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. For the first time in a long time, she felt utterly helpless, trapped, both of them, in a house full of secrets, trapped by a man who had no right to make them feel this way. In the days following the incident with Mr. Anik, Ada couldn't shake the feeling that every person in that house was holding some sort of secret, a hidden truth that no one dared speak aloud. Even her mother, usually so open and strong, was quieter than usual. It was as if she, too, was waiting for something, an answer, a confrontation, or perhaps just a release from the suffocating tension. It wasn't until one afternoon, when she was helping her mother in the kitchen, that the suspense finally reached a breaking point. The phone rang, its sharp, unexpected sound shattering the stillness. Nkechi paused, wiping her hands on a dish towel before picking up the house phone. She quickly sent Ada to tell Mrs. Anik, who was outside in the garden, that she had an urgent call. She rushed inside to answer the phone in the living room. From the kitchen, fragments of the conversation drifted through the walls. No, that's not possible. What do you mean? Are you sure? The madam's voice, usually calm and controlled, was now frantic. Her clipped, hurried words were laced with panic. What do you need me to do? Something bad had happened. She hung up the phone, standing lost in the center of the living room. Then, almost as if speaking to herself, she muttered, I have to go now. Marie?
Oh, it's getting good. For those who just joined us, welcome to the conversation. We are listening to Madame, a book written by yours truly with the assistance of AI in the latest challenge, 7 days to write this novel. Okay. And so we're going to going through it and just seeing how you can use this technology, not in a way where you're not actually doing the work, but as a tool to more efficiently do this type of work, right? And so what has happened in this story, still on chapter 4, is homeboy was making the move when his wife was still around. Like, Mr. Anik is doing too much. But anyway, she gets a phone call, and she's usually cool, calm, and collected. But now she gets a phone call from her family back in the village, and she has to go, right? So that's why she's frantic and moving around. So let's continue.
Please, go and find my suitcase, the one I use when I travel, she ordered. There's a family emergency in the village, a very serious one, and I have to go. Marie scrambled around the house, her movements frantic and distracted by the urgency of the task. When she returned with the suitcase, Mrs. Anik had already begun to hurriedly stack her clothes on the bed. Marie wanted to ask questions, but she knew better than to say anything. Amora appeared at the door, dazed and confused. She stood quietly, watching her mother darting around the room, clearly unsure of what was happening, but the sense of urgency in her voice left no room for
Wait a minute. We haven't heard from Amara. So Amara is the young girl. Artist, welcome to the conversation. Long time. Amara is the young girl. So there's 2 young girls in the story. One belonging to Nkechi, who's Ada, and Amara would be the other young girl that lives at the location. Just to catch everybody up, like, who's Amara? That would be the boss's daughter, right? Who's a little bit, I wouldn't say she was weird, but she's a little bit interesting in her movements. But let's continue. So again, this is also an illustration of how we write these stories, how we incorporate characters that come alongside the main character and create intrigue, create interest, so that it can kind of push the story along, right? So you build these worlds around these characters, not so intricate that you get lost in it, but something that you can actually close your eyes and listen to the story like they used to have to do back in the day, and can really put yourself there in the scene. To know what's happening.
Mama, Amora asked in a soft voice, her eyes wide. What's going on? Mrs. Anik, her usual composure gone, gave a brief shake of her head. There's been a family emergency in the village. We must leave. We'll be back in a week, but I need to handle this. Before Amora could respond, the maid returned, asking her if she needed anything else. Yes, pack a bag for Amora too. Mr. Anik was working late and had no idea that his wife was planning to leave town.
So the wife is just doing a lot, no? Like she gets this, like what could the emergency be? She's like, pack a bag. I don't even got to tell the hubby that I'm leaving. Like what's really going on?
She quickly dialed his office, but the call went unanswered. To be safe, she sent him a text, hoping he would get the message. Mrs. Anik instructed the driver to be ready, and before long, she and Amora were gone, disappearing into the car that would take them away from the house for the next week. The silence and questions hung in the air for hours after the madam departed. Everyone she left behind was unsure of what to do next. The gardeners, the housekeepers, the cooks all gathered in the servants' quarters, whispering amongst themselves, trying to make sense of the sudden turn in events. What do you think happened? One of the gardeners asked, his voice low. She seemed so upset, like something bad had happened.
And just imagine that your boss, right, just runs out, gets a phone call and runs out. Nobody really even has instructions of what they should be doing and what should be happening. Like sis just packed up and just took off, like something major is happening. So those who are left behind, they're whispering amongst themselves, like, Madame has left. What is going on? What do you think shall happen next? You know what I mean? That's kind of the scene of they're left to kind of put together the pieces. And usually the woman of the house is who's ordering things. So by the time the boss comes home, who knows, right?
I don't know. Another staff member responded,
she said she don't know.
Her face creased with worry. But it seems serious. I've never seen Madam like that. Ada stood by the window, watching the car disappear down the long driveway, her mind racing with questions. Whatever happened, it had shaken her, perhaps more than she was willing to admit. But there was something else, too. The suddenness of the trip. The urgency. It was all.
Thank you, Lala. Lala says one can gradually hear more into the story, but the mechanical AI voice spoils the flow of the story a little bit. A little bit. Y'all know I've been reading stories. I love reading stories. I'm giving my voice a little bit of a break. I ain't even gonna lie. I'm giving my voice a little bit of a break, and it does kind of break here and there. I think overall, I would give the AI voice like a. You guys tell me what you would give it. I would give it like a 87. You know what I mean? I think it catches the Nigerian accent well, the cadence and the way in which it's speech. You can hear when it glitches sometimes, right? And I do, if you listen to it for a long period of time, then definitely that's why I broke these up into chapters. But yeah, I think overall AI voices kind of does that. You can kind of hear it, but I would agree with you. I'll give it about an 87 because I've heard worse AI voices. I'm just giving my voice a little bit of a rest, but yeah, let's continue.
Too much. Once the last of the cars had left the estate, the house fell back into its usual rhythm. The servants, unsure of what had occurred, slowly returned to their duties. But the uncertainty still lingered. Everyone was on edge, each person wondering if the others knew something they didn't. Chapter 5.
Wait, let's pause. So that was chapter 4. For those who've just joined us, welcome to the conversation. Let me know if you guys want me to read chapter. What's this next chapter? Chapter 5. Let me know if you want me to read chapter 5. I'm not going to be able to read it like the Nigerian lady. I can do my Nigerian accent only a little bit, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, we can either listen to, wait a minute, we can listen to chapter 5 via AI, or I can read it. It's not that long of a chapter. Sometimes I have to give my little voice a rest here. I'll wait to hear what you guys are saying. And for those who have just joined us, welcome to the conversation. This is listening to, going over the book that's available. Actually, let me share it now, and then I'll see whether you would like for me to read the next chapter, or we could keep rocking with AI, the AI Nigerian voice. Hold on one second here. All right, boom. So I just wanted to show you that these things are available. I am doing better at my promotion and marketing, okay? So these things here are available, and we have this particular book. If you come to the link in the description, you can come here to the ebook right here. And actually, I have to change this. The audiobook is what I'm doing now, but the ebook is available here on Gumroad. What's also available is the course, which we see right here, how to write your novel in 7 days. Now, again, this is a great disclaimer. I don't think it's sharing it. This is how to write your novel in 7 days. I don't think I need to do a disclaimer that I write novels. I write books. So I did it in 7 days because the process is familiar to me. If one was to do it for themselves, it probably would take longer. I wrote it in 7 days. I shared it on social media. It's not a gimmick. It's not a hack. It's not, but it's also something to consider, that because I do this, I knew the processes and I was able to move through them fluidly. I've been doing this for many years, right? So this here is the novel that you can definitely check out and support. This is what you're listening to now. And then this is if you want to do it for yourself, it kind of takes you through writing the novel and how I wrote the novel. Now, you may have other people telling you how to write a novel in 7 days, or you may want to go about putting in prompts to learn for yourself. Either which way, whatever, as they always like to say, whatever floats your boat. But nonetheless, this is how I did it, and this is what I did. And for those who are new and totally new, and it's like, who is this girl, Amuna, and what is she sharing? I've been getting myself together. I actually put together this little resume here, so you can see a little bit more about who is speaking and how and why I'm finally at the place that I am today, as it relates to sharing, as it relates to the things that I do. So these are some of the things that I've done in media, some of the highlights, some of the books that I have written, fiction and nonfiction, as well as the articles. And then this is some of the feedback from the things that I've done in the past: storytelling, reading, literature, health, all of the things of that nature. So I kind of wanted to share that because there's my little promo that I had to share. Support the thing, right? Support the lessons, support the courses, so that I could continue to do this work in this sound. We actually have sound now that was from earlier. Let me go ahead and see if we have any feedback about, it was written. Lala says she gonna give AI a 52. I mean, it does what it does. It does what it does. 7 days. Yeah, the 7-day journey was wild. It actually started off with a prompt, right? Usually it takes me longer. Depends on what the book is. If it really, when you sit down to write, and then I'm gonna go on to chapter 5. When you sit down to write, so some people call it writer's block. I could take this off the screen now. When you sit down to write, there's a lot that goes into it. First, you have to determine, I'm just doing an impromptu here, what you're writing. Am I writing nonfiction? Because then if I'm doing nonfiction, I'm going to have to do a lot of research. If I'm doing fiction, I'm still going to have to do a lot of research. Because in order to write this book, I had to know a little bit about Puff Puff and Ngozi soup and Pepper Pot and pepper soup and the things that they eat, the culture, the things that they say. And this, what does a lot of this is social media. It has shared a lot, the movies have shared a lot of the culture. So then when I'm writing a book in this way, it sounds like it's not tone deaf to the culture. So whatever you're writing, you really have to be researched to a certain degree, unless it's just totally, Dr. Seuss type vibes where you're just out in the ether somewhere. You're just using your full imagination. But if you want to have some realism in the writing, then I would suggest doing some research. The writing takes preparation, right? Now, sometimes stories just flow out and it doesn't take a long time to write because you have so much stuff stored into you that when you start writing, it just comes out. In other times, the story may put a little bit and stop and put a little bit and stop. So you have to know what type of story you're going to write or you want to write, fiction and nonfiction. And then you can have historical fiction. There are all different genres within fiction that you can also write. It helps with the process for many people to outline, just like we were in school and we're writing papers, the same things apply. Many of the same things apply. So, but with this particular book, I say all that to say there's some people who plan and there's some people who just fly through the process. Y'all can almost guess the one that I am. So what me writing this course is taking my type of way in which I do things and condensing it and putting it in a way that maybe somebody who needs to be more linear can follow along with. And again, ChatGPT is great with these prompts. So if you need help along the way, you can use free resources. So the 7 days, it was really a test to see if I can write, edit, lay out, create this cover that you see, if I can do all those things in 7 days. And I actually did. From start to finish. So it can be done. Would I do it again in 7 days? I would probably take longer, right? But nonetheless, we're going to go in now. I'm going to read now chapter 5. How about that? I'll read chapter 5 because I did give you guys 4 chapters of, what do you call this thing here? AI, okay? Chapter 5. So Miss Aneke has run off now. She's in the village. And the reason why I wanted the AI to read it, because I don't want to make the characters Jamaican. And for some reason, when I get excited, all the characters become some type of Caribbean characters, right? So I'm going to try my best to behave myself. Okay. In the absence of the madame, the house fell into a strange kind of limbo. With no one to direct the operations of the home, the staff looked to Nkechi, who had now assumed an unofficial role of authority. As head chef, she was now in charge of all kitchen operations, by which Mrs. Aneke gone, but with Mrs. Aneke gone, her authority extended beyond the kitchen. She had to manage the household staff, cleaners, gardener, maid, even the security guards. They all looked to her now for direction, but Nkechi knew that her role was temporary. Their madame would return in a week and things would go back to normal, wouldn't they? So how she becomes the person that is in charge and she's the first last to be hired, she's thrown into this position. So let's continue. As the days passed, her unease grew. How much longer could she ignore the way her boss eyed her when his wife wasn't around? Mr. Aneke. That evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, she stood at the stove in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pepper soup, her eyes fixed on the simmering broth, though her mind was elsewhere. Because remember, he already tried to come in and make a quick little slick pass on her, right? She had been told by Mr. Aneke once again with that smooth, insistent voice that she was to prepare the meal just for him and deliver it personally to the dining room at precisely 7 p.m. What in all of what is going on, mister? What does he think this is? Anyway, it wasn't the first time he had asked for a special meal, but the request now made her skin crawl. There was always something about the way he'd insisted, his tone, the way his eyes lingered on her, that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. What would you do? For those in the comments, right? If you were a man, is it different that the boss was a woman and she was doing this? And if you're a woman, is it different that the boss was a male and he's doing this? Like, how would you feel? Would you quit the job? Would you go tell HR? In this case, there ain't no HR, right? So all of these things considered. Let's continue. And with his wife gone, with no one to oversee the household or temper his actions, she had a feeling time was running out. In the meantime, Ada had been told by the housekeeper, Maria, who Mr. Aneke had given the night off, that she was to go out for the evening. So not only is he trying to make sure there ain't nobody around and he wants this special dinner, but he's also given instructions to send her daughter away. I wonder what Mr. Aneka have planned. What does he have planned? Let me see. Maria had offered little explanation, only that she was to be taken to the movies. It was the first time in weeks she had been asked to leave the house since it was summer and school was on break. She was unsure about leaving the house with someone other than her mother. Don't worry, Ada, it'll be good for you. Your mother will be fine. You'll come back soon. So this is the maid telling her, come. So she's like, you ask me, mother, if me can't go nowhere with you, lady. Anyway, it was clear that they were all being pushed into roles they didn't fully understand. As the clock as the clock ticked closer to 7, Nkechi glanced nervously around the kitchen, uncertain of her boss's next move. She had prepared the pepper pot as best. That's pepper pot. That's Guyanese. She had prepared the pepper soup as best she could, making sure the season was just right and the fufu had the perfect consistency. Inecha could almost hear his voice in her head as she worked, dictating what she should do and how she should behave. Her hands trembled as she scooped the soup into a large steaming serving dish. The aroma was rich, spicy, and intoxicating, but it did little to calm the anxiety gnawing at her. With the dish carefully balanced in her hand, she made her way to serve him, her footsteps softly echoing through the room. So this is her job. Now he's making her feel very uncomfortable to do her job, which is prepare food, right? Because he's being creepy. What in the world? Anyway, with the dish carefully balanced in her hand, she made her way to serve him, her footsteps softly echoing through the room. She entered the dining room, and there he was, already sorry. I'm sorry. Oh no, there's nothing funny here, but in my mind it's funny. So he says, and there he was. Where am I? Already seated at the mahogany table, his gaze fixed on the large empty chair across from him. Suggestive much? He looked up at as she entered, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling smile. Nkechi, he said, his voice smooth and thick. I was wondering when you will arrive. At 7, sir, at 7. I'm arriving at 7. That's when I was supposed to come here. I'm sorry, when I write, I actually talk back to the characters as I'm writing them. But anyway, please join me. I wouldn't want you to miss out on this meal you so graciously prepared. So he tricks her into making this meal and then low-key makes it into a house date. He gestured for her to have a seat in the chair across from him. She gently placed the serving dish down on the table. The warm steam rose from the bowl. Nkechi turned to leave, but his voice stopped her before she could take a single step. So she was over there pretending like she didn't hear nothing he said. Where are you going? Come, sit. It's not every day you prepare such a meal for me. Bro, Nkechi is not your wife. Go call. Let me take a seat because that man are too rude. How many people think Mr. Aneke is rude? The man, rude man. It says, but his voice stopped her before she could take a single step. I already read that. He says, you deserve to enjoy it too. So it feels weird because now your boss is like, come in, have a seat. And you're like, yo, this is weird. Where's this conversation going, right? Lala say he's a dirty predator. Yeah. He's into stuff. Like, we'll see. I don't know. Is he we're going to see. We're going to see. It says here, there was something in his voice, something that held her in place. Despite the unease swirling in her stomach, she knew she couldn't refuse. So he was offering, but he was actually telling her, right? She understood that this wasn't just about food. It was about power, about control. Nkechi wasn't sure that what he was planning, but she knew she had no choice but to comply. And then sometimes we think we don't have a choice, but in reality, the other option is, like the young daughter is saying, quit. You know what I mean? Go back to selling puff puffs in the hood. I mean, it is a choice. It may not be the one that you want, but it's a choice, right? So here she feels she has no choice. So let's continue. Reluctantly, she sat down, folding her hands in her lap, her eyes fixed on the table. The silence between them stretched out as though as though time itself had paused. Eventually, he picked up his spoon and tasted the pepper soup, his eyes closing in satisfaction as he savored the rich flavors. I ain't gonna front, Lala, you might be right. He's giving Creek vibes for right now. He's giving Creek vibes. Excellent, he purred, nodding approvingly. Yo. Ah, blessing him. He says, you always know how to please me. Why does he keep saying these very weird things, bro? Anyway, she said nothing, though every part of her screamed to run, to flee from the situation. If anyone saw them together like this, the whispers would never stop. Because, yeah, the help is going to be like, yo, you're sitting, catch it, sit on with the boss. He says, eat, he commanded. Bossy much? Her hands still slightly clasped in her laps, moving hesitantly towards the spoon. She lifted it slowly, tasting the soup. The warmth spread through her, but it did little to calm her down. It's good, she said, managing a small, tight-lipped smile. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You know, he said suddenly. Wait, you know, he said suddenly, his voice dropping to a low, almost intimate tone. I've been thinking about you a lot. You don't have to serve us all the time, sir. That's what you hired me for. Nkechi looked up at him sharply, her mouth dry. I don't understand, sir. I'm not even going to do the Nigerian accent right now, but okay. His smile deepened. I think you do. The word struck her like a blow. She had to stop him. She had to leave. But before she could respond, he leaned forward, placing his hand on the table. You've always been so careful, haven't you? So guarded. Yo, my man, I play mind games. The man are going our mind. You don't have to be anymore, you know. Not with me. I've been thinking a lot about what you could offer me and what I could offer you. What type of Joseph preposition this? What in all of Joseph in Potiphar's house is going on? Let's continue. For those who just joined us, this is chapter 5 of the new book that I wrote in a week with AI for the AI challenge. That's what I'm start calling it, right? But again, it doesn't sound like AI wrote it because I wrote it and I just told AI what to do. Okay, but let's continue. It says here, she stood up abruptly, but he reached out and grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. His touch felt good but wrong. Nkechi, he said coaxingly, sit down. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the pressure of his presence closing in around her. Just as she opened her mouth to protest, the door to the dining room opened with a soft creak. It was Maria. What Maria do ya? Maria not supposed to do in movies with the little pitney. Anyway, it was Maria, her eyes wide and probing as she looked between the two of them. Sir, I know the staff has finished their duties for the night, the maid said. She peered down at the ground to avoid eye contact. But I forgot my phone. Because Maria mash up in Dalios now, you know. Maria mash up in Dalios. He loosened his grip for a moment. Because remember, he just held on to old girl hand and told her about some sit down. So Maria bust in like, yo, Reggie, you know, what kind of thing this? He loosened his grip for a moment. A hint of irritation flashed on his face before his mask of politeness slipped back into place. Because he couldn't let Maria make the thing look, you know what I mean? You gotta wait, Lala. You gotta wait to see what happens, right? Because dude is putting on the full court pressure. Full court pressure, okay? All my books are clean and respectful. This is to all show that you can do clean and respectful literature with lessons without being raunchy. You understand? So he loosened his grip for a moment. Okay, so Maria bussing and he caught. He says, yes, of course. Thank you. Please see the young Ada enjoys the movies as planned. Maria nodded, though her eyes lingered on Nkechi with an unspoken understanding. She looking at Nkechi like, what in the backside? Yes, sir. As she hurried away, he reclined in his chair, his fingers drumming against the table like, you should go. Because he thought if I get everybody out the house, it'll be green lights. And now here comes Maria witnessing. So he's like, you should go. Because now he needs to think, right? Enjoy the night. She didn't hesitate. She stood up quickly and grabbed her plate. But as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her once again. I'll be watching you. And sometimes it feels like somebody's watching me. This guy over here talking about, I'll be watching you. Bruh, watch your clock. She didn't turn around as she fled the dining room, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the cold, silent house. As she walked down the hallway towards the servants' quarters, the feeling of his hand on her wrist burned in her memory. She didn't know how much longer she could stay here, in this house where secrets, lies, and threats whispered from every corner. Boom! That's all y'all getting for today, y'all. That was chapter 4 and 5, and that was a special request. So I read it, okay? And that's what's going on. Lala says, please don't tell me she falls in love with old Mr. Nkechi. We don't know what's gonna happen. But just to catch us up till next time, the wife is gone. Nkechi is the impromptu, fill-in, and this guy sees it as a prime opportunity to make his move. So we're gonna have to tune in chapter 6 and 7 to see what happens next. Okay. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and pray that everybody have a blessed day. Where we at 45 minutes. Yeah, I'm gonna wind down. And we will talk again. All right. All right, all right, all right. Leave your comments underneath the box. All right. All right, one. Oopsie.